General Hospital will reveal interesting facts on Wednesday, May 7, 2025. First, Christina extended an olive branch, not out of forgiveness, but out of strategy. Somewhere deep within, she knew a storm still churned inside her, fueled by betrayal and unhealed wounds. She hoped that by presenting this truce, she could maintain a sense of control or dignity. Yet, when she stepped into the room and locked eyes with Ava, all notions of peace shattered. The air between them crackled with tension. Ava's expression was smug, condescending. Like she held all the power, and in that very moment, Christina understood that this confrontation would not end in resolution, but in escalation. As Christina tried to explain her position, Ava struck back with a venomous accusation, suggesting that Christina had deliberately cut the brakes, causing the accident that injured Liz and Rick. That claim, laced with contempt, hit Christina like a slap to the face. Shock gave way to fury, and before she could stop herself, her anger erupted in a torrent of insults and rage. She called Ava a low-life parasite, a leech who had shamelessly drained Alexis of money and respect. Every word dripped with resentment, and every syllable seemed to land like a punch. Christina wasn't just defending her name, she was avenging her pride. Ava, never one to back down, met the attack with equal fire. The insults escalated, and their voices rose into a cacophony of rage. Christina's accusations grew more vicious, fueled by years of unresolved tension and pain. She screamed that Ava had always been a liar, manipulator, and opportunist. She painted her as a woman who thrived on tearing others down and capitalizing on chaos. Ava countered with barbed reminders of Christina's past, her mistakes, and the reckless spiral that had led her here. There was no room for reconciliation, only deeper wounds. The confrontation turned physical in a heartbeat. Furniture crashed, vases shattered, and framed photos fell from the walls as the two women clashed like titans locked in personal war. Christina, driven by emotional exhaustion, shoved Ava with both hands, her eyes brimming with a mixture of fury and tears. Ava retaliated with equal intensity, pushing back, her nails digging into Christina's arm. It wasn't about right or wrong anymore. It was about dominance, about proving who had suffered more, who had endured worse, and who would survive the aftermath. By the time the room descended into chaos, both women were disheveled, panting, and consumed by rage. But what remained clear was that any attempt at reconciliation had been obliterated. Christina's initial intention of peace had been ripped apart, mocked, and trampled by a woman who never intended to meet her halfway. The physical bruises were nothing compared to the emotional ones, wounds reopened, trust annihilated, and any semblance of family or friendship utterly destroyed. Nothing about this meeting could be salvaged. And so, they stood in the wreckage of their own making, two women bound by history and hatred, staring each other down with nothing but loathing in their eyes. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was seething. Ava's smug satisfaction masked a deeper insecurity, while Christina's burning gaze hinted at a storm yet to come. This wasn't an end. It was a beginning, a prelude to a larger war. Because in Port Charles, grudges never die, and forgiveness is a currency few can afford. Second, after the incident involving Rocco's alcohol poisoning, Gio found himself at the center of a storm he never intended to create. The guilt weighed heavily on him, and the confrontation with Dante left him both humiliated and emotionally drained. Dante's anger, though understandable, struck Gio harder than any punishment. For the first time, Gio truly felt the weight of responsibility, and it crushed the carefree recklessness he had previously embraced. But amid the whirlwind of blame and tension, it was Emma who stepped in with a quiet grace that disarmed the chaos. She didn't take sides, she listened, understood, and calmly diffused the situation with a maturity far beyond her years. Her presence that day left an indelible impression on Gio. Emma wasn't just kind, she was wise, calm, and impossibly patient. She didn't lash out at him for his poor judgment or lecture him about consequences. Instead, she helped Dante see that Gio was already punishing himself, and that what he needed now was guidance, not condemnation. Watching her navigate the storm with such poise made Gio see her in a completely new light. She wasn't just someone who floated through life unnoticed. She was strong, thoughtful, and full of quiet fire. And Gio, for the first time, began to care about more than just himself. Drawn to the sense of mystery that Emma carried with her, Gio found himself seeking her out more often, not with bold declarations, but with small, deliberate efforts. He asked questions about her life, her interests, her family. And slowly, bit by bit, he started uncovering the layers she had kept hidden from the world. Emma wasn't just the girl who stood in the background, she carried stories, burdens, and secrets that few had ever seen. She had dreams that stretched far beyond Port Charles and fears that had shaped the way she walked through life. As Gio uncovered more, he became even more intrigued. He discovered how fiercely protective Emma was of the people she loved, how she had quietly sacrificed her own happiness more than once just to keep peace in her fractured family. He learned of the silent battles she fought, the choices she regretted, and the hopes she still held on to, even when they seemed impossible. And through it all, Gio saw not weakness, but resilience, something he had never truly recognized in anyone before. This growing understanding of Emma changed Gio in ways he didn't expect. He began to reflect on his own past, his mistakes, and the path he had taken to get here. Her influence wasn't loud or forceful, but it was powerful. She made him want to be better, not to impress her, but because he saw in her the person he could one day become, if he let go of his defensiveness and fear. Emma's strength gave him courage, her compassion gave him hope. And her presence became something he quietly began to cherish. For Gio, the shift was undeniable. What began as curiosity turned into admiration. And admiration slowly began to blur into something deeper. He didn't fully understand what he was feeling, not yet. But he knew one thing with certainty. Emma wasn't just someone he wanted to know, she was someone he needed to understand. And for the first time in a long while, Gio felt like he was standing at the beginning of something real. Third, Lulu was filled with gratitude, her heart swelling with thanks for Brooke Lynn. The gravity of the situation, with Rocco's life hanging by a thread after the alcohol poisoning, had left Lulu shaken. But in the midst of the chaos, Brooke Lynn had been there for her. Lulu had never imagined the woman who had once been her rival would become an ally in such a critical moment. The way Brooke Lynn had acted without hesitation, saving Rocco and remaining calm under pressure, left Lulu in awe. It was a moment that made her reevaluate not just Brooke Lynn's actions, but the depth of her character. For Brooke Lynn, however, the entire experience was bewildering. She hadn't expected any recognition, let alone gratitude, from Lulu. She'd spent so much time building walls between herself and the people around her, especially Lulu, that having her rival express appreciation caught her off guard. Brooke Lynn couldn't help but feel a mix of confusion and uncertainty. For so long, they had been at odds, their history marred by bitter exchanges and misunderstandings. Now, in the face of a crisis, they were working together, and Brooke Lynn found herself questioning the nature of their relationship. The rivalry that had once defined their interactions seemed to fade in the aftermath of the crisis. It was replaced by something unexpected, an understanding. The tension between them eased, leaving space for a new kind of connection. As Brooke Lynn looked at Lulu, there was no hostility in her eyes, no judgment or lingering resentment. Instead, she saw a woman who had been through her own struggles, a woman who, like her, was simply trying to do what was best for the people she loved. It was this realization that made Brooke Lynn feel something she hadn't anticipated, guilt for all the time she had pushed Lulu away, and gratitude for the opportunity to move forward. Lulu, sensing this shift, saw an opportunity to bridge the gap between them. She didn't need to hold on to past grudges, especially not now. She wanted to help. To offer something more than just words of thanks. Lulu had always respected Brooke Lynn, but now, seeing the vulnerability behind the woman's tough exterior, she wanted to offer her support. She made the decision to help Brooke Lynn find closure about the child she had lost. It was a personal journey for Brooke Lynn. But Lulu knew that offering her assistance could mean more than just a gesture, it could be the first step toward healing for both of them. The offer was one of true compassion. Lulu had been in Brooke Lynn's shoes before, having suffered her own losses, and she understood the ache of unresolved pain. She knew how important it was to find closure. To fill the emptiness with understanding, even if it meant facing uncomfortable truths. Brooke Lynn, for her part, was taken aback. The offer to help find her lost child, to give her the chance to search for what she had lost, was something she hadn't expected. It wasn't just an act of kindness, it was a lifeline, and it was offered with no strings attached. Lulu wasn't trying to fix Brooke Lynn's problems, she was offering to walk alongside her as she faced them. As the days passed, the growing sense of peace between the two women didn't go unnoticed. Dante, ever aware of the dynamics around him, felt a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. The tension that had once dominated their household was slowly dissipating. Replaced by a tentative but genuine understanding between Lulu and Brooke Lynn. It was as though the weight had been lifted off of both of their shoulders. Dante no longer felt like he was caught in the middle of an emotional battlefield. Instead, he found himself breathing a little easier, knowing that the women he loved were no longer at odds. Chase, too, noticed the change. The friction between Brooke Lynn and Lulu, which had once made things uncomfortable, was no longer a concern. Their interactions were now marked by something more serene. A shared understanding that allowed both of them to be vulnerable in ways they hadn't been before. The household felt lighter, and for the first time in a long time. It seemed as though they could move forward without the burden of past conflicts looming over them. This newfound peace was a testament to the unexpected healing that had taken place between them. A healing that Dante and Chase could only hope would continue to grow stronger. Finally, Brennan had been growing increasingly impatient with the slow progress of the mission. He had tasked Jocelyn with the crucial job of approaching Professor Dalton, a key figure in their operation, but weeks had passed without any significant developments. Jocelyn's attempts were lacking. And Brennan could see that the mission was being delayed by her inability to make real headway. His frustration was reaching a boiling point as he realized that the more time they wasted, the harder it would be to accomplish their objective. The camping trip dinner incident only added fuel to the fire. What was supposed to be a simple, low-key operation had turned disastrous when a fire broke out at the campsite, completely derailing their plans. Brennan had been counting on this as a moment to gather vital intel, but instead, it turned into an unplanned disaster. The failure to control the situation during the dinner left Brennan feeling even more helpless, and his confidence in his team was beginning to falter. To make matters worse, the attempt to extract information from Emma through the USB drive had also failed. This was supposed to be an easy win. But Emma had proven far more elusive than they had anticipated. Brennan had hoped that retrieving the data from her would give them the upper hand, but without it, they were left in a vulnerable position. This setback was particularly infuriating for Brennan, as it disrupted the entire timeline of their operation. In a fit of anger, Brennan unleashed his frustration on Vaughn and Jocelyn. His sharp words cut through the tension, and his disappointment was clear. "This mission is falling apart," he yelled. His voice laced with fury. "I trusted you both to handle these tasks, and you've failed me at every turn. What the hell are you thinking?" His temper had been building for days, and now, he couldn't contain it any longer. He was livid, and his fury was directed squarely at them. Vaughn and Jocelyn stood silently, taking the brunt of Brennan's anger. Both knew that the situation was dire, and they understood the consequences of continuing to fall short. Brennan's wrath was not just about their failures. It was about the potential consequences of their mission failing. They had been tasked with something significant, and every mistake they made pushed them closer to disaster. There was no room for error now, only results. Despite the sting of Brennan's outburst, Vaughn and Jocelyn knew this was a wake-up call. The mission could not afford any more delays. They had no choice but to push forward, intensify their efforts, and correct their mistakes quickly. The stakes were higher than ever, and failure wasn't an option. They needed to regain control of the situation, or everything they had worked for would be in jeopardy. With the pressure mounting and Brennan's harsh words still echoing in their minds, Jocelyn and Vaughn exchanged a brief glance. They knew what they had to do. They would need to accelerate the pace of their mission, take more calculated risks, and ensure that no more mistakes were made. The clock was ticking, and if they didn't meet the expectations set before them, they would face consequences far worse than Brennan's fury. Time was running out, and they had no choice but to deliver.